So again, I'm Bruce Jacobs. Company is called EILLC, and we are producers of EnviroInsite, and we have a very tight connection with EarthSoft, and working with EQuIS database. It's become one of our principal input data platforms, although many users continue to use our other data platforms, either in Excel or Access. So what we're going to kind of focus on how you create these boring logs with data in EQuIS, in EarthSoft's EQuIS database. And as you might expect, there's a short presentation, and then we're going to go right to a demo. So let me get started. I'm just going to show you, first of all, these are just a couple of examples of boring logs that have been created. And in this case, these actually were not created using the EQuIS database, but there's nothing in here that is not available to you as an EQuIS user. It's just a matter of selecting which data fields you want and mapping them over into the design template. But this gives you a sense of what, the real flexibility of the program, of how we can present lithology, doing downhole plots, and we can do well construction diagrams with, for example, in this case, we have 2 wells within a single borehole, and downhole plots. But it's entirely flexible. And you see, they're really very different. So that's really made possible by our design template, and I'll show you kind of how that works. In this case, you see here we have water. Oh, here's my cursor. Here the water levels are plotted. They're actually plotted in 3 locations, but you can plot them as you like. And then here was one case where we did something very flexible, and they wanted to show something about the I forget what it's called, Atterberg, or some geotechnical information. We figured out a way to even add that capability. That's kind of a custom thing. All right, so that's kind of the end goal. Keep that in mind. And I'm gonna kind of step you through the workflow, and then go into EnviroInsite and show you how it actually works. So what you need to do, these are kind of the major steps. You populate your database, you create your design template, or you can use one of your company's standard design template. You select the locations you want to create the logs for, create the logs, and then you either print them or send them off to a PDF. So keep that in mind. We're kind of, I don't know if we're exactly following this workflow in the presentation, but that was kind of the intent. We're not going to talk a lot about database, although I will kind of give you some resources to help you to figure out how to do that, because that is certainly a significant issue. I don't underplay it, but it's not something to be covered in office hours. So this is what the design template looks like. On the right-hand side are the fields in EQuIS. And essentially all you do is you grab these and then drag them over into a position. Actually, I think there's a video. There it is, I've forgotten. So here's a little video showing how you drag. So you grab, in this case, the loc type. I guess that comes to DT location, loc type. You grab it into place within the design template. And I'm gonna grab, there it is, remark 1 from DT lithology, and drag it into place, and then change the width to fit the space. And then once you've done that, you can now then save out the template. It saves to an XML file, or you can then go in and create your log. All right. So that's the design template. And if your company is standardized on template, you don't have to create it from scratch each time. You just open the template and start from there, and then create your logs. And then there are 2 ways of saving your work. As I said, you could save it out as a template. You can also save it out within the EnviroInsite document. And one of the advantages to that is it has a link to the database. So you don't have to, so you just restore the document, automatically connects to the database, loads essentially the same information that's in the template, and creates the log. So there are 2 ways of doing that. The template's more portable, like between projects or between users. So that's one good way of doing that. This image is just in here to get you a sense of that there's kind of a one-to-one mapping between the elements within the design template. Here's the design template on this side. We just looked at that. And the actual log that gets created. So for example, HDR:will, it's essentially a header data field with the well name in it. And then when it's actually created in the log, it comes out as B-30. So just keep that in mind. Everything you create within the template points to a data field, and then when you create the log, you actually get the content of the data field. There are 5 sections within the boring logs: a header, page 1 header, the title block, the downhole area. The size of these is adjustable, so you can essentially assign the size for the log that you want to create. And the page 1 header, as the name implies, would only show up on page 1. So there may be like redundant information, or information that would be redundant if it appeared on page 2 and page 3 and page 4, and you only want to see that on page 1. You put that information within that page 1 header section. Okay, so what information would go in within each of the sections? Typically, in your header area, you put in things like a site map, might put in the date, the page number, and then some very specific information about individual location. And again, this would include that what we call information that might be redundant, like the coordinates or the surface elevation. And the title block usually has just elements like string, lines, rectangles, basically that are going to be the title block for the downhole sections. All right, so what goes in the downhole elements? You can put axes. We can do either a depth axis or an elevation axis. We have a well construction diagram, and these can be done either in a scaled, so you can actually scale it based on the hole diameter, the casing diameter, or we have a kind of a simpler sort of abstract way of representing well construction diagrams. We can show lithology both as hatch and text. And that text that appears there can come from any number of fields within DT lithology. And I'll get into that a little bit about what fields those are in a minute. We can show sample intervals. So these come from DT sample or DT sample parameter. And they can be shown essentially as like a symbol, just showing where that sample was taken, or with some parameter that's associated with those samples. And then we have downhole point data, which can be shown as basically just the text values, or you can draw these like charts, like a downhole chart to represent, particularly if you have a lot of data. It's probably more economical, more communicative way of presenting the data. And as I said before, you can put in water levels. We use essentially the same logic that's used within EQuIS to calculate water elevations. And I won't get into what all that implies, but if you're an EQuIS user, you probably have a good sense of what that is. And then we have the ability to bring in either an image, which in the image could be like a logo. Typically, that's what you bring in as an image. And we can also show a site map. And this is kind of a new feature that was created relatively recently. What you do is you create your map first. And that's what we're looking at here at the bottom, where it says Insight 1. You can't read it, probably :plan. So you have a plan view map with the locations. You can essentially show, in this top uppercase, we're showing B30, and you can see where it says site map, and it's actually showing a little piece of the plan view map in the boring log. And we call those key maps. And so that's 2 ways of showing sort of image data. And finally, you can either print these to any like Windows compatible printer, a printer with a Windows compatible driver, I should say, or we can export these to PDF. And you could use either the Adobe print driver, or we have a essentially built-in PDF driver, and does a really good job of faithfully representing what you see on the screen. You end up in the PDF. All right, so I told you a couple times that you need to really understand, probably before you even get started with your project, you're going to try to figure out, well, what fields are going where, or what fields are drawn on from within EnviroInsite. What I recommend you do is to go to EnviroInsite.com/help/index, and that's with uppercase I, index.htm. You can access that from our EnviroInsite.com webpage. And look for this section here which says tables/fields used in generating boring logs. And then you can scroll through this and really get a good sense of what fields is it possible to draw from when you're creating your boring logs. Okay, so that's the resource, and there's one. Oh, I didn't even show it here, but there's a kind of a mapping that needs to be done, but I won't get into that. That's kind of a technical detail. We do have a number of training videos. Those are at EnviroInsite.com/video.html. And there are, I went through it the other day and I picked out at least 5 that are applicable to this particular topic of boring logs with using data in EQuIS Connect. So there are 2 of them. They're just kind of general ones on EQuIS Connect. There's one just called Getting Started with Boring Logs. And this, boring log generation using EQuIS data source, that's really like a 3-minute version of what we're getting today. And then in the recorded webinars, that last one called Generating Boring Logs Using EnviroInsite with EQuIS Connect, you'll notice it has the same title as today's talk. But that one goes on for about 40 minutes and includes a lot of details that I've kind of glossed over today because it just didn't seem appropriate with this audience. But if you're going to be creating boring logs in EnviroInsite and your data is in EQuIS Connect, or excuse me, EarthSoft EQuIS, I definitely recommend that you would watch the full video. I think you'll get a lot out of that, or at least skim through it if you don't watch the whole thing. We do also have general, again, and this is in our help files, there's an entire boring log section in it. In that, it covers a number of the things that we talked about, including the design window, options, creating well construction, diagrams, downhole intervals, downhole point data. So it's all in there. It's a terrific resource to help you with this. And we also have a knowledge base, and that's at EnviroInsite.desk.com. And I just tried it out this morning. I typed in log in the search whatever that's called, search box, and I came up with about 20 different. Basically, they're kind of like answers to questions that people have posed in the past about boring logs. Not all of them are applicable to just EQuIS, but there are some. In fact, there's even, I see here, an EQuIS boring log template, which you might want to use as like a starting point for your own boring logs. I've already connected to the EQuIS database. If you've never seen like how you connect to an EQuIS database from EarthSoft, you might want to watch one of those training videos. I'm going to move this over here to the right to make it, because I kind of have limited space and I want it to be more vertical than left to right. So what you see here is essentially a site map. I've brought in a Bing Maps and I've just plotted locations with a label tag. And you'll see we're going to be looking at B30, just like, you know, so this is kind of the one of interest, the location of interest. And to create boring logs, you come over here on the right and you click on, this is called the task pane, and then create windows is selected here. And then if you go to boring logs, and you'll see there's a tooltip that says create tab window to draw conventional full page boring logs. That sounds like what we want to do. And you'll see it'll just create like a blank. Don't panic. If you see a blank there, it doesn't mean that it didn't work. It means you need to select what you want to draw. So I'm going to select plot. If you select plot logs, then it's gonna put you in the template, basically a blank template, but that wouldn't be a good idea for this demonstration. So I'm gonna put logs from template, and I'm gonna pick one of the boring log templates that was created before. And I'm just gonna select one location. You can select a number of locations. And when you actually go to create the log, it'll create logs for all those locations. All right, so there we are. We're in, and there it is. It created the log. And as you can see, here's our sitemap with B30 in the center. If I had picked B31, it would have put a little sitemap with B31 at that location. Here's my logo. And I'm going to go over here to the left in the plot control window and open that up. And I'm going to turn off page 1. So there's page 2. And you notice page 2 does not have, remember that page header section that we decided, or whatever is in there that we decided to put in there does not end up on page 2, which is exactly what's happening in this case. If you want to create a PDF from here, you just say File, PDF All, and I won't do it because I just don't want to take the time, and I will show you when I just created it. Here it is, B30 log, and here it is. Actually, I didn't create this one just now, because you see this one doesn't have the key map. This was created another time, but it's not difficult to do. And you can see the lithologies there, the downhole plots, the sample intervals, and the text. Everything's in there, including page numbers and then the date at which, you see, this was actually generated a year ago, March 23rd at 11:11. So that's the PDF. Let me show you how you get back into the design template, because the design template's not a static thing. So if you want to go in and change it, you can just say, I right-clicked on that. I say edit. And that brings up our design template. I'll maximize this to make it so we can see it a little better. You can zoom in on areas. So we can zoom in. I'll just click the little plus sign. And then what you'll notice is that each one of these, if I right-click on, let me just right-click here on pore pressure. And so what it shows me is your downhole point data. So I know that's, in fact, that is downhole point data, pore pressure. And then there are all these options applicable to that particular element or downhole element. And here it is where it says create chart, which is what we've created. It's green. If I change that, I could change it to say something. Let's make it really out. And then you can actually set transparency, symbols. You can put water levels in there. I'll just click OK. And I'll show you how you might want to add another field. So let's pick a field. And unfortunately, I can't remember which of these fields are actually populated. So let's pick one. Let's pick, actually, I know this one's populated because, in fact, it's already here. So I'll bring it in and we'll see it twice. The drilling method. I'll just put it somewhere. I'll put it up here. So now we've made 2 changes. So the next thing you'd probably, if you want to save these changes for a future time, you would come up here to template and say save. And you can either save it to the same template name, which the template name's down here, or you could do save as to save it to a new one. And I'll save it to a new one so we don't overwrite the one we're doing. So I'll call this my office hours template. So there it is. So if I ever want to bring that back up, I can. And now I'm going to actually generate this log by clicking OK. And it actually, there we go. And you can see now that this is red instead of whatever it was before. Oh, it was green before. And I think on the next page it shows more obvious. And here's rotary. So we've added that particular field and it ends up inside of the log. So that's kind of how it's done. You just drag and drop them in, and then you can edit the properties. So if I had wanted, I could have changed the font style. I could change the text height. I can rotate the text. And that's kind of how it's done. I think that gives you kind of an overview. There's a lot of details probably that we don't want to get into right now, but if you have any questions, I'm open to taking those now.
The first one from Mia says, can multi-level wells be shown?
Yes, and I showed you that one example. where there were actually two wells. There were actually, in that case, there were actually two wells at a particular location. Unfortunately, EQuIS is a little rigid in how it deals with those. And it would depend on how you had the data entered. I don't know if you could do exactly what I showed you in that. Let me go back to that first example. This was done using Excel as your data input. You see where you have two wells. In EQuIS, because you have a location, I'm not going to get into all the deep end in this because I could go on for a long time. But I would say yes with some caveats. And what you should do is contact me and we'll go over how to do that.
Instead of sort of like, you know, you can take PID, I guess that's PID readings. So
Yeah.
we also sometimes collect, like with a handheld device, collect metals readings.
Oh yeah.
And so they're called they're XRF metals. And so we would show the actual like acronym and then the concentration. So, you know, AS for arsenic and then, you know, 300.
Right. Where do you store that data?
Right now that data is stored, I'm gonna, off the top of my head, I believe it's in DT sample parameter.
Perfect. Yes, we can do it.
Okay.
And it will show up. I did show one example here where we had sample data. It'll look like, ooh, you didn't want to chart. It'll show up like.
It's fine if it's, yeah.
Yep, definitely.
So you could sort of replace the PID data with, and does it need to be in DT sample? Could it be in DT result also, or does it need to be in DT sample parameter?
No, we do not use data from DT result. I mean, think of a boring log. It's not typically.
No, it's not. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's in DT sample parameter. I think I already saw that you guys show EC data, so that is fine. Back to the just because it was my question before around the multi-level.
Oh yeah.
We do have cases where we have double pipes, so we have, you know, two pipes in the ground, which you showed the example of, and then we also have cases where we have one pipe with multiple screens.
And well, the question. Let's start with the second one. One pipe, multiple screens, which is a little easier. Do you within DT well segment you'll show each of those screens?
Yes.
Yes, then that one's easy. Yes, we definitely can do that one. The other one is difficult because they probably have, do they have different syslope codes?
They have different syslope codes, and then they're linked to the borehole syslope code.
You know what? Well,
DT location, so.
We can make, right now the code will not do it. However, it's not, because I've already made that change so it can be done within Excel. I can do the same thing for you guys.
Okay, so that would be possible.
Yeah, definitely be possible, but it's not out of the box. I'd have to make some changes to the code.
Okay, cool. Those are all my questions for now.
Okay. Thank you for the questions.
Thank you so much for agreeing to present this for us and focus specifically on these boring logs. I think they're really great.
You're welcome. There is a 30-day free demo. So send an email to, you can send it to Liz and she'll get it to me, or send it to sales@EnviroInsite.com. Just say, I want the demo, and I'll send you the setup file.
So thank you so much, everyone, for attending, and we hope to see you at next week's office hour. Have a great day.